You are listening to New Theory Radio. Theory Radio.
Hello and welcome to another edition of New Theory Radio here live from the CFRE studios. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host. This is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. The show is available on our website at www.newtheoryradio.com as well as iTunes and most recently Spotify. So please send us a follow or please subscribe to check out the program so you stay up to date. But definitely excited for today's show. I'm actually joined by someone who was actually on the pilot episode of New Theory Radio, one of the lost episodes, and another individual who I had the pleasure of interviewing numerous times when I was a local news personality here within the Peel region. I'll start with my first guest, Wasim Parkar here. Wasim, thank you so much for joining us on New Theory Radio yet again.
No problem, man. It's great to know that black tea has lesser caffeine than green tea.
Yeah, you're Googling it right now?
Yeah.
So funny enough, Wasim was thirsty, so I bought him an Arizona lemon iced tea, and he's worried that it has a lot of caffeine in it.
Is this sponsorship?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
I was trying to get a Chai Time sponsorship.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they actually retweeted one of my photos. Because they're
Cool.
located here.
Okay.
But now Wasim's worried because he has to get up at 5 a.m. tomorrow. Big work day tomorrow?
Yeah.
12
hours.
12 hours?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. That's crazy.
Working in the coal mine.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the person you just heard is my second guest. He is a former city council candidate. Almost came close to winning in the Mississauga area. He's a great individual. You've been a part of the
Transportation. It's always been a hobby issue of mine.
I'm trying to think what the acronym was. I totally forgot.
Oh, the Western GTA.
Yes,
Summit.
Western GTA Summit for sure.
Yeah. We had a good transit group for several years, citizen-driven to try to get stuff built and pressure our elected officials to put some shovels in the ground.
And very, very high up financial executive in his past life.
Well, I try occasionally, yes. Work at some big banks, make a little money.
Hey, so humble about it. My good friend Joe Horneck.
Great political commentator, though.
Oh, great political commentator.
Best there is.
Well, it's here's a little backstory.
Best there is in the soon-to-die Peel region.
Oh, you went there already.
Stop.
Wasim just threw it out there. Well, what I love about having both of you on is, number one, Wasim was my producer at Rogers TV, and we would always have Joe on because Joe would help carry the segments when I never knew shit about politics.
Pretty much, yeah.
And Joe
would be available at the drop of a dime as well.
and Joe would literally carry the entire shows for myself, and Wasim would just be so grateful when Joe would enter. But
I live near the studio. And I remember Wasim once said,
we have Bill McBain here?
Yeah, we need to fill some airtime. And he's like, let's get on and just jam for a bit.
Yeah.
We ended up talking about Amazon Prime shopping and ISIS taking over Syria.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a very eclectic mix of what we could get to. Yeah.
But it was great because then when I had did my business show, I would get Joe on because Joe, being that he's a financial executive, he would be a great commentator for like the Panama Papers and like other whole types of other stuff as well. So you're so versatile, Joe. I can always rely on you.
Wow, I can talk a good game.
But I thought it'd be great to get the band back together and do a little open podcast / episode here on New Theory Radio, specifically around some topics that I'd love to get both of your points of view on. One in particular is it's no secret that we are 7 months away from a Canadian federal election. And for those that listening who are not from Canada, this podcast is situated in Canada. And I myself, as well as Wasim and Joe, are both proud Canadian citizens, I think.
Both or all three of us?
All three of us, sorry. All three of us. Sorry. It's late. It's late.
Yeah.
We've all worked a long day.
Yeah.
But, it seems that there's a lot of interesting news and happenings leading up to this election. It's been quite the fascinating race, I must say, specifically when it comes to which party has the leg up, because I can't tell you which one actually does. Sure, there's obviously
it's
the
like
polls.
2015 all over again.
Yeah,
It feels like it. It feels like it. And, I saw a very interesting article that I flipped both of you. It was really an article that I found in Vice talking about how nobody is going to feel good about their vote in 2019.
This is going to be a nasty election.
You think so?
And potentially in a way that Canadian elections may have never been before.
Yeah.
I get the sense, one of the things I think that has been permeating across the border is the culture from down south, which is more authoritative. We see it at the provincial level. Doug Ford made a bunch of announcements today, the Ontario Premier, around transit and transportation. The quality announcements I won't get into. They're pretty good, but I think it's more the style that's there, right?
Yeah.
A very authoritative. Let me tell you about the people, and this is the way it's going to go.
You should do cartwheels.
Get out of my way, like very choppy linguistically.
Yeah.
Very short phrases and that are punchy. And it's part of a kind of
dedicating one of the lines to his brother, like this transit lines for Rob.
But for those who are not familiar, Doug Ford is the Premier of Ontario.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe he's pouring out some wine for some homies.
Rob Ford's brother. People definitely know Rob Ford.
Yes, Rob Ford. If you Google, you will have a fun time going down that rabbit hole. So anyways, I think it's part of the culture. I think it's not just the U.S. I mean, the UK and a bunch of European countries. We've all seen this kind of rise in the populist wave at the national level. Andrew Scheer is kind of harder guy to thump the desk and kind of get people riled up, but his style and the people around him are still of that background and nature, right? So I think, on the opposite hand, you have the self-proclaimed feminist and, unicorn rider, Justin Trudeau, people who like to see him as a soft, in touch with his emotions kind of guy. And so the two butting heads are going to be absolute parallel opposite approaches to the way politics is run, and so I think it also went from an absolute cakewalk for Trudeau, and all of a sudden now that's been called into question, and I think that's interesting now because polls are now more mixed about who will win that.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, Joe. You didn't mention the third leader, Jagmeet Singh. Do you feel even now that he is leader, that the NDP is still not in the conversation?
I think he's probably had more people decide to not run for re-election than he'll probably win seats. I just think his party seems to have no confidence in his leadership, and voters will smell that. And outside of their strongholds, I think they're going to have an incredibly tough time getting any momentum. And then, you could go further down the ballot, though. What are the Green Party going to do? What's Maxime Bernier going to do?
Yeah, the People's Party.
Yeah, so, if Maxime Bernier is able to steal even 4 or 5%, that actually swings quite a lot of races. It'll be interesting to see if he's able to get any people of talent or note in any of these races to actually run for him, or if this is truly just a vanity project and it's a one-man show. And, but, he seems to speak to people who don't like immigration, who have this kind of right-wing ideology that is different from the Conservatives, but definitely takes from their core base of people who believe in that kind of stuff. So, again, if he's able to get any kind of traction, if he's able to raise enough money, then he could steal a lot there.
And that's what makes this election scary for me, is the fact that we are seeing a lot of themes, a lot of ideas that have resonated down south, rear their ugly head within Canada, which by all means, when Trump got elected in the US, I think a lot of us felt, we live in Canada, it doesn't exist here. Since 2016, it's been quite surprising to see just how it does actually exist here in our backyard. Wasim, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm not surprised. I believe it always was there. I mean, even before Trump got elected president, I was at a school board meeting where a Quran was burnt in Peel. So, I think maybe what it was is maybe it was a bit under the surface. Now you see it more out of the surface. As far as my political opinions go, I'm really just going to piggyback on Joe. I mean, this is the guy that we both relied on, man. So I'm not going to offer much nuance.
This is New Theory Radio hosted by Joe Horneck.
I'm not going to offer much nuance in comparison to what Joe said, because what Joe says makes a lot of sense. I'm just curious, maybe if I can piggyback on Nav and ask you a question. Do you think the sort of separatory politics, these right-wing ideologies, might just alienate a certain base so much that the left-leaning parties may still actually gain from that.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I think, the question will be, how much does the left-leaning parties split the vote, right? So if the left-leaning parties split the vote, well, then that's definitely a way that the conservatives slide up the middle. So that'll be interesting to see. I think in the end, like, this is, as you say, it's speaking to an undergroup that was always present, but was very casual or quiet about its feelings for the most part. And people like Trump have given it a voice, and things like Brexit and some of the European leaders too are very hostile. Look at even not even just
Jair
Europe.
Bolsonaro.
Yeah, look at Turkey. Look at Venezuela. There's a number of countries around the world where the strong men are absolutely winning, and frankly, it does feel like the bad guys are winning lately from a centrist, progressive type person. I do feel like the bad guys seem to have the leg up the last while. The reason I would call them even bad guys is that they're not traditional conservatives, who I have no problem with. They do play footsies with racists and homophobes and people who are not reputable people. I think look out in Alberta, like some of the candidates they've had there, who they've now
like
some they've decided to boot, and some they have not decided to boot.
I mean, you're looking at a time where now liberals and Democrats or left-leaning centrist people are looking back at the days of like George Bush and Stephen Harper and thinking, oh, what nice guys.
Yeah,
that's how low the benchmarks become.
It's crazy to see how much George Bush in the last 3 years has actually been more celebrated and more welcomed back into society.
Of course.
Absolutely. Or the death of his father.
Yeah.
I mean, people really grabbed a hold of Junior even and just kind of said, hey, you're not so bad. I think it is interesting to see that.
So do you feel specifically here when it comes to the Canadian political climate that a lot of these individuals that are running saw what happened in the U.S. and was like, hey, this is a really quick way for me to get in power, is just sort of tap into this demo of craziness that exists when it comes to the
only thing I will say, Andrew, you can correct me on this, right? One of the guys on the Conservative campaign in 2015 for Stephen Harper was this Australian whack job, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like
one of the advisors.
One of the advisors, and he was apparently the brainchild of like the niqab ban and stuff like that.
Wow!
And at that time, it backfired. But is it just because 2015 was different from 2019, and maybe this time it might not backfire?
It's tough to say. I mean, the tactics are really changing too. I mean, the other thing I think that this is piggybacking on is a distrust of centrist figures, a distrust of corporations, a distrust of people in authority. You look back to maybe when you were kids and you're kind of like, hey, I trust judges, I trust school teachers, and I trust leaders in my community. Doctors are great people. I would always trust them. Police officers, no problem with police officers. And now I mentioned all those different groups, and probably you're all thinking in your head some bad thing about them, right? Oh, I remember that police officer who got too aggressive on that person, and there's the video of him beating them. The doctor who's, messing around in the back room, fondling people. You can go through all of these things, and we have managed now with the spread of information and the spread of grabbing a single story and making it sound like it's a common cause, that, all of these groups that used to be held very highly have been all torn down. And, I don't know, maybe there's some sick egalitarianism there, but it does feel like, who do kids look up to nowadays? A YouTube star?
Yeah.
Like, who is it that your children are going to model that they want to be part of, right?
Yeah.
It's certainly not going to be people in political office. Judges and doctors are all questionable now. Like, what do people want to do with their lives when they're little kids? I mean, police officers and firefighters still seem appealing to my son.
Well, even on that, Joe, like, as a father, how are you feeling when it comes to seeing all this taking place and just thinking about your son's generation when he gets a little older and he's in the position to vote?
Well, I think the interesting thing I think we try to do a little bit with my son, who's only 8, mind you, but to question what you're reading and why someone's telling you something.
Yeah,
I think, and again, like in ways that I never would have had to think about when I was younger, not even his age, but older than that. You could read. I grew up in Windsor. I'd read the Windsor Star as I was delivering it to people's doorsteps. It would have never occurred to me to think, well, there's going to be some very factual lies in this. And I don't think that there are in these major newspapers. But nowadays, because people don't read a physical paper, they just read whatever it is online, they don't know where to pick up true facts. And, look at the anti-vaxxers. Look at things like this, right? There's so much disinformation. People don't know how to tell truth anymore. And frankly, I also feel that people are so busy in their lives, they don't seem to kind of care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the risk of aging myself, I can relate to what Joe said, because I grew up at a time where, reading a newspaper was a source of pride, because it showed that, hey, you're in tune with the world.
Totally.
And there were so many benefits. You'd improve your vocabulary. And reading a newspaper meant, what, you're getting information. It never crossed your mind in those days, is this a leftist paper, a centrist paper, a right paper?
You just trusted what you were reading.
You just read a newspaper.
Yeah. And it was certainly not an elitist thing to do by any stretch.
No.
I mean, I remember studies in the UK, people would consume 2 newspapers a day on average when they're doing their commute on transit. And you're kind of like, well, that's amazing. Like, who in the world would do that now?
Yeah.
Who doesn't have to do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, for me, even I consume a lot of news, but a lot of it's come through aggregators, right? Where you see the headlines that you think are most interesting to you, but even that, it's being filtered to what are you the most interested in?
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So I think all of this will make a really interesting federal election, because what are people going to think? People went from kind of trusting Trudeau, and now that's being called into question.
If I remember correctly, in 2015, now I don't know how much stock to put into this. Maybe you both will differ with me on this. Some part of the analysis was that actually the debates changed the tone of the election.
Yeah.
Is that something that's possible? Because if I'm not mistaken, for the longest time in election year, many people thought it was Thomas Mulcair's election to lose. There was that brief period where he was on top. And then the first debate changed a lot of perceptions negatively for Mulcair and positively for Trudeau. Yep. So I wonder, is that something you both are looking forward to?
You're right, because I think at that point, too, people had a very unserious view of Trudeau, I would say, right? And I think, and sadly, in some cases, he still continues to feed that, right? He is the selfie prime minister to some extent. That is both great in the sense of it shows a bit of a connectivity. It shows a newness in terms of engaging in a new media.
I actually have a selfie with him before he got elected.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to do. It looks like you're hanging with common people.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's also seen by many people, especially older people, as being frivolous. The guy who's just interested in the photos and doesn't really think about the policy.
Yeah.
Or doesn't really engage with people on an in-depth level. It's just the 2 seconds and I'm gone level.
That's fascinating you bring that up, because I see that same dynamic with Jagmeet as well. And I actually know Jagmeet personally, and I think he's a great guy for who he is. But he has that sort of following as well when it comes to, he's the guy that you'd love to get a photo op with because he's so well known. And well dressed. But then he's had, admittedly blunders when he's spoken publicly about some of the stances that the NDP has had when it comes to certain issues, or not even being educated on what's going on. And to your question, Wasim, about the debates, I'm so curious to watch the debates, because I just want to see all 3 of those leaders share a stage and just want to see what the dynamics like, because we know how charismatic Justin Trudeau can be. We know how great a speaker Jagmeet Singh is. Andrew Scheer, I'll be honest, hasn't really done much for me when the way he sort of speaks and conducts himself.
And that's the thing, maybe much like Trudeau the previous time, maybe he will be underestimated in some way.
Yeah.
Although that would be kind of odd given how long he has been in politics, right? I mean, essentially, if I'm not mistaken, he got elected when he was in his late 20s, selling insurance or something like this in Saskatchewan. And I mean, he was, Speaker of the House for several years. He is by no means new to politics.
Yeah.
So it'll be an interesting dynamic. I think the other interesting thing will be is how much do these groups I was talking about before, the fringe groups, grab a hold of these candidates, right? So how much whether he wants to or not, because I don't actually think Scheer would endorse racist views in any way, but there are people near him that would.
Oh, and the far right seems to be gravitating towards
him. And how much can he push back and say, no, that's not for me.
Yeah.
I'm your...
the response to the New Zealand...
Yeah.
That was a big blunder. And I genuinely think if Scheer was being honest to himself, he would have sent the right tweet the very first day.
Even the photo he took at a mosque was just...
Yeah. He mismanaged that, but I think... it speaks to what Joe says. I think it's the cavalry that's behind that's making him appear that way.
It's the Faith Goldie and people like that. The yellow vest people and this kind of stuff. Who apparently, Facebook just took down a bunch of their accounts.
They banned completely.
But then, sure enough, a few hours later, a few of them were back up with just different accounts.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is another new technology that we all have to be mindful of. Is how much is out there spreading disinformation or hate. Can you control it in any way? There's a lot of pressure now on these tech companies.
It's fascinating to see the Faith Goldies and sort of these other fringe parties and individuals latch on to Scheer, because when you think about the way Faith Goldie performed in the Toronto election, she came fourth, I believe,
something like that.
And then I remember, who was the individual that came in second in Mississauga?
Kevin Johnson.
Yeah, he came in second by a far second, right?
Yeah, but he got 5 figures.
Yeah. And so what that tells me is that here within the GTA, there obviously are people that think that way, but it's not the vast majority of voters. But so for me, I don't know, I'm seeing a tough correlation where if they get behind Scheer, that's going to be sort of the election winner for him. I don't know if that's gonna be enough to sway the vote.
I think it'll also come down to, can Trudeau rebuild the trust? But most importantly, I think in the end, the things that have called into trust with Josie Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott, in the end, I think a lot of people will not care about that. Fast forward 3 or 4 months.
Yeah,
the reason I would say that, because unlike other scandals, there was no bodies, so to speak.
Yeah.
There was no personal enrichment. There was no misspending of taxpayers' dollars. So I think in the end, it's what made this get to this level is Trudeau's inability to put it to sleep by just being forthcoming in the beginning and just putting it down. And I do think that both Philpott and Raybould did have agendas. They were not naive, perfect purple who you don't record somebody months in advance of your cabinet resignation and then all of a sudden pull it out and think, that was spontaneous. I think they ultimately shot themselves in the head because of that. But, I don't think people care. I think people will care about real issues. They'll be, how am I going to get to work tomorrow? Is it going to be crazy traffic? Is my bus going to show up on time? Who's going to pay for these things? Am I going to have a job? What are my kids going to do in school? And in this case, I think a lot of that will be, what does Doug Ford do here in Ontario, the largest voting base? What's happening in Quebec? I think some of the provincial stuff will end up feeding and reinforcing the federals. And so if people are draconianly cutting budgets here, they'll kind of say, I don't necessarily need to have that at the federal level. They're in a different financial situation.
So 7 months out, how would you predict it all going at the very end? What would be your prediction as to how the government's going to look when we get past October?
My sense, I think that Trudeau will be able to get a majority again, although it may be touch and go. And the reason I say that is because I think the opposition will continue to embrace the Jody Wilson-Raybould scandal farther than the public cares. And so it will end up defining them as they're interested in this, and they'll forget to define themselves on other things and tell people, how am I going to lower your taxes? How am I going to get you to work earlier? What am I going to do for your kids? Which is, in the end, I think what more people will care about. Because I think, frankly, that's what most elections are fought on. Do I have confidence in the government? And, I think Justin Trudeau is at a low at this point. I think he should be able to rebuild at least some of that back.
Wasim.
Yeah, I think 7 months is a long time in politics, and I agree with you. It seems like people are angry with Justin right now, but I still think as Canadians we're a little bit more nuanced, and I don't mean that in a pretentious way. I think that we take our votes pretty seriously. We do analyze the issues. Right now, at this moment, I am nervous. I don't maybe share the exact same confidence that Joe does about a majority, but at the very least, I think he'll still be able to scrape a minority if it has to come to it. But I don't think the Conservatives or the NDP, neither Scheer nor Jagmeet, are strong enough, in my opinion, to cause a serious challenge.
I'm probably edging more towards your opinion as well. I'm predicting a minority just based on what I'm seeing and how I'm feeling just from a citizen point of view. I think this election is going to give a lot of people permission to really show off how they really feel about things, because historically I've always felt that when you don't know who you're going to vote for, typically you go liberal because you feel like that's the safe vote. I think now people are going to want to push the envelope a little bit and maybe side with some of these extreme views that might be shared or might be rallied around some of these ideas.
The one thing also I think in Justin's favor is it's not like 2015 when it was a get Harper out situation, or it's not like last year's Ontario provincial election get Kathleen Wynne out. I don't think it's anywhere near the level of that. So I think that counts in Justin's favor very strongly.
Although I will say this, the people who dislike him do dislike him to that level. So I think hardcore conservatives have absolute venom for him.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that I think, whenever the other party's in, it usually takes people a little while to get to the point that I think conservatives are at now with him. There's a lot of beyond, especially when you crawl onto the internet, there's a lot that goes well beyond polite disagreement and gets into absolute hatred and venom. And so, it's interesting that, and again, this is maybe because the internet exasperates these things where, people just are really nasty to each other now. And they feel they can do this because it's all anonymous and, you don't get caught, or you blame somebody else if you don't like what ends up coming out the other side, right?
Do you both predict that we might see any type of movement when it comes to some of these other smaller parties like the Green Party or the People's Party? Do you expect any type of traction, maybe even some candidates that end up making the House?
The Green Party always has a chance to make the House for a couple of seats. Bernier, other than maybe his own seat, is really challenging to see. Again, maybe it depends if he's able to attract anybody other than just himself and show that it's not just a pure vanity project. But, it's questionable, would he even make the debates?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, if he makes the debates, well, then that makes it easier to possibly win seats. If he fails to make debates, then, he probably gets run around with the Rhino Party and the Marxist-Leninists, right? I mean,
Or Nav's favorite party, the None of the Above.
Oh, yeah.
The Above Party.
Oh, yes. That's a story for a different podcast. I think that video clip from Rogers is still online.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember,
None of the Above Party.
That was my first TV interview gone bad.
Oh.
Where the candidate completely hijacked live TV. I remember Wasim just...
Greg Vesna?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was his name, and
he's a strong...
It was hilarious because Wasim was just fuming, and he was just like, nah, just ignore it.
So I think the other thing is, in this world... even more than it always has been, it does feel like someone can throw a curveball and absolutely upset the entire analysis. And that we could be sitting here a few months from now and just absolute egg on our face. Who could have possibly seen that thing that happened?
Well, I'm definitely going to bring you guys back closer to the election.
Well, I mean, and it could be something related to Brexit. It could be Donald Trump. It could be something like New Zealand that happens.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way to know these things, but it does feel like the world is more unsettled in that nature. And frankly, that I think is one of the things that underlies all of this, is that people are unsettled in life today, right? And for so many reasons, it just no one feels confidence that things are going great.
Yeah.
Even though, you look at every economic statistic, we are clicking along at some of the best levels we have seen in decades and decades, but no one acts like it. No one feels it. And, there is just this unsettledness.
Yeah.
We're at the top of the market, yet everybody only thinks about the downslope.
No, totally.
And we've been doing this now for years now, and the downslope hasn't come. It'll come eventually, as it always does, but,
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair point you bring up, Joe. And just to switch gears, I do want to talk about a second topic. Might be a very brief one, but have you guys been paying attention to this U.S. college admission scandal that's been taking place in the U.S.? Which seems to give me a weird look.
No,
it's probably like, why are we talking about this?
It's just like...
Can I buy a degree?
Yeah. I mean, these kind of things have happened in the world.
I feel like we did a show...
I feel like this always happens.
I know. But it's just funny that happened to Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman. Like, they're both now on trial. Looks like they're going to face some jail time.
I think it's funny because it seems like a very... like a new take on an old problem.
Exactly.
Like, we were talking about George Bush Jr. a few minutes ago. And I don't know, maybe it's urban legend, maybe it's true, I'm not really 100% sure, but, did his father not donate a lot of money to Yale for him to get in there? Maybe it was urban legend. Maybe he just got in based on the fact that his father had gone there, and I know that used to matter a lot at Yale.
Yeah.
But, I feel like I could have the dumb kid and I donate the library.
Yeah.
And somebody always gets in. This is just like a new take on an old problem.
It's all you University of Waterloo people listening to this. I paid a semester's tuition just by writing essays for others.
Really?
Oh my God, arrest me.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, this is a thing. Like,
I'm not cutting that out.
Don't. Like, this happens, man.
But it's interesting because the reason why I bring it up is I did stumble upon a very intriguing article that Global News put out regarding how this college admission scandal is almost putting the Canadian school selection process under a microscope. And I was thinking about it because I remember when I was in high school, and it was when
we don't have the same barrier to entry.
No, we
right?
did it. We did it. We
don't.
But it's interesting because I remember being in high school, and it was my drama class.
Yeah.
And it was midterms, and the drama teacher literally coming up to me because I think we had to submit our midterm grades to get selected for the program, and she literally asked me like what do you need to get into your program? And I remember being dumbfounded. At the time I was like thinking, is this actually happening? And I was just terrified that this was like a trick question. Yeah. So I literally gave the most humble answer ever. I was like, because I was already doing well in the class, so it didn't really matter. Yeah. But that stuff actually happens. Like it happens. And I think from a student standpoint, you're almost like, oh, okay, no, this teacher's looking out for my best interest, is trying to get me into the program that I want to get into. But in hindsight, it doesn't really hit that you're kind of doing something illegal, if that makes sense. You're kind of lying.
Not necessarily illegal. I think there's a little bit difference between the illegality and because I mean, there's some of that stuff was outright fraud, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
Like, or at least it's alleged. Like, I mean, posing for pictures on a sports team that you've never held the racket for. That's a little much. But I mean, like, have rich kids always had a one-up on poor kids? Of course they have.
Yeah.
Do you think they didn't have tutors? Do you think they didn't have somebody help them write the application so it sounded a lot smarter than they otherwise would have? Do you think that they can afford to be on the hockey team as opposed to the kid who can't afford to be on the hockey team? Who can pay for the equipment and take the time to show up? Like, this has always happened, but this is just a new, frankly bizarre and wacky chapter in this kind of stuff.
And I guess also another example of a story that's a reflection of the age, It's because social media has made this story bigger than it really probably needs to be. And
I think, like I said before, like you hear the stories, and it now makes you question the entire entrance examination methods for the entire U.S. college system.
It does. The whole SAT system.
Okay, so we're taking like 50 cases. How many kids go to school in the U.S. every year? Literally millions, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And yet we're going to take a case of 50 or whatever. You can triple it, even if it was 5,000 out of a million. And you're going to now start making decisions based on that. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of life we live in, though, right now, right? Where you grab the one-off and you treat everything like it needs to be questioned.
I feel like the biggest issue we probably face here when it comes to post-secondary education is probably down to finances, like you mentioned. Like the fact that you had to write other people's essays.
Well, I could have worked.
I know. I didn't. But hey, no, I don't. I think that's brilliant. I think why not? Well, but to your point, the cost of tuition is crazy. I still have friends now. I'm 31 years old. I still have friends now
that are paying back OSAP.
Still haven't paid it off.
Yeah, of course.
And for them, they've accepted it. They've just accepted the fact that this will be my debt for the next couple of years.
Yeah,
it's crazy to see. That's probably the biggest issue that we face, is that we're not necessarily being.
Joe, what's Doug Ford doing about that?
I think I just opened up a can of worms.
Nothing positive, nothing positive on that one. And that's the thing, actually. I mean, taking it to the student financially is one of the go-to things, because you know what? They don't vote.
Yeah.
And if they don't vote, it's easy to take it out on them.
Because indirectly, that's the way that you almost separate those low-income families that can't go to school, is that, hey, if you can't meet the OSAP standards, you can't make it, and then the rich kids do benefit.
Yep.
Because they can afford it.
I mean, the other side is, I think we always have this like very linear way of looking at things too. Like, okay, I'm done high school. I immediately need to go off to university or college. It's funny, in the UK, I went there for a master's degree, and it was the second year they were charging anything for a degree in the UK. And so there were a lot of the students who they had never paid anything in their lives.
Because if you're a citizen, it's free, right?
Correct. Yeah. At the time, it was. And it was funny. So why they actually started putting in fees, and frankly, they were incredibly modest fees compared to even what we were paying in Canada back in 2002 or 3, was because people were hanging out for way too long. You know, in there is a BA was a 3-year degree, but people were taking 5 years. But there also was an attitude of like, you know what, after high school, I'm going to take off for a year.
Yeah. Travel.
I'm going to try. And like, I think Australia has that, or no, New Zealand has that kind of more like, you know what, this is a point in your life where you can afford to take off and do some things. You don't just have to go from A to B to C to D. As you know, in North America, we're far more driven by that kind of thing. We're far more driven by needing to fulfill these goals quickly.
Totally.
And I've always felt you've had a European mindset.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Canada doesn't suit you. You're way too intellectual.
I feel like Joe needs to go fix Brexit. He needs to.
Oh my God! Is that a topic?
Have another referendum. That's how you fix it. Teresa does not have a plan. So I mean, you know, I think. So if you say like people working for a little bit before they go to university, it's not the end of the world. But I think we are hitting the breaking points of like where this is proper. And I think, you know, when people are getting into their 30s and still having debt, that's not right. Unless you are doing advanced like MBA, doctorate degrees. And then it's like, okay, you're making a conscious choice not to enter the job market. You're, you know, if you're talking about your BA and you're still paying it back at 30, well, then that's either you're terrible with money or the system's just wrong. And we're not letting people get the chance they have, because it's tough in life. You know, all of your fixes costs are right up front, right? You got to go get school, you got to go get married, you got to buy a house, you're going to have kids. You know, it's a really stressful 20s and 30s and 40s.
It's fascinating now when I find myself in situations where I talk to students or new grads, you know, from a more career standpoint, how a lot of them are doing that, where they're either after high school taking that year off, working, or doing some extra courses, or really being selective on what program they should choose. And then I'm also seeing after they complete that undergrad, it's like, no, I'm not going to work right away. I'm going to go just do my own thing, maybe try to start a business, maybe try to jump around, do some different projects, maybe travel. And almost seeing how mature they are when it comes to that time that they did take for themselves and being able to apply it to their new career or to their new lives.
It's very different. Like before I did my master's degree, I worked for a year and a half.
Because I'll admittedly say, when I was 22 and I graduated my undergrad, I wasn't ready for the workplace.
No.
Mentally, I wasn't ready. Wasim's probably thinking I was never ready for the workplace. Considering my history.
We're still questioning it right now.
I know. But I remember... I still remember it was my first job that I absolutely hated and quit right away because it just didn't make sense to me.
Oh, that obnoxious real estate thing you were doing?
No.
Okay. That was your second job?
Oh my God.
How millennial. You quit right away. What a quitter.
This was actually, it was like a recruiting job. I don't really talk about it because I don't really put it on my resume. But I remember going from university where the schedule was out of whack. I would sleep in. I would have classes randomly throughout the entire day. And then a month later, going into a job where I have to be in the office by 7:30 and I have to leave by 6, it's a slap in your face. Like it's how do you adjust so quickly when you're not used to that right away and the maturity isn't there yet?
Yeah,
that's what I challenged with early on, and I've grown to appreciate people that have been able to take time off to figure out what they want to do versus sort of jump right into it.
Yeah, and there is maturity. Like I mean, I can say within my master's degree class, you know, the people who. You know, you're expected to kind of comment on whatever the reading was for the week and blah, blah, blah. And the people who had even some business experience, like out in the workforce, their take on things was extremely different than the people who were just kind of gone through from course to course to course. Mom and dad still paying for it. It was very different.
Even during my MBA, I always loved taking the evening classes.
Yeah, MBAs really do appreciate people who've had work experience.
Because I only had a year's worth of work experience because I was in a co-op MBA program. But I love being in the night class because I would be with those people that would be working during the day. And you would get a lot of that great insight that you normally wouldn't get if you just went the academic route. So.
Well, and I you know, as a banker who's hired tons of MBAs and other people in the past,
everyone has their MBA nowadays.
I find them so cute when they come straight out of the MBA program and think that everything is just like in the textbook, it is just cute.
Yeah, it's a reality check.
Yeah.
No, that's funny. Let's move on to our last topic because I know Wasim's eager to leave.
That's okay. Take your time.
Actually, this kind of relates back to the first topic when we're talking about the federal election, but Joe, it's no secret you are someone that's very engaged from a civic standpoint, and Wasim being in local TV for as long as you were.
Yeah. I'm not anymore.
Not anymore, but you were. You were quite.
No, I'm not engaged anymore.
Engaged? You're married. We know that.
No, I'm not locally civically engaged.
No, but okay. When you were a producer producing local television, you had to be somewhat engaged. Not actively engaged, but in the know.
Yeah.
It seems nowadays, and you see this, with the fact that we're seeing the emergence of the alt-right here in Canada, and the fact that even locally within the areas that we live in. So right now we're in Mississauga, and they're having an issue with wanting to leave Peel region. I've noticed, and maybe this could also be attributed to the fact that I'm getting older, but I'm also noticing a lot of people within my network and a lot of people in general that are getting more civically engaged when it comes to a lot of these issues, and are not scared anymore to speak their mind when it comes to things that they disagree with from a policy standpoint, or from a more city sort of location standpoint when it affects where they live. And I use the Peel region debate as an example.
Who's this? Who are these people? Is Radha Taylor one of them?
What do you mean? Radha Taylor, she just reports on it from the Brampton standpoint. But
I just wanted to know there was more than one.
No. Okay, well, it's funny because the city of Brampton, which is where I live, you guys are both Mississauggans.
Yeah.
City of Brampton, since the LRT, I say debate, has had an influx of a lot more civic engagement when it comes to issues affecting the city. I never noticed that when I was a kid. Never really noticed it when I was in school either. It seemed like when the LRT fiasco happened, that's when all these people came out of the woodwork and you started having all these activist groups.
But I think that's a great example of when civic engagement happens is you need a catalyst. And I kind of feel the opposite, frankly, about Mississauga. I think there's an extreme amount of disengagement.
Really?
We have a ridiculous,
an
absolutely apathetic, disengaged public.
Agreed.
One of the lowest voter turnouts of any large city in Ontario. And I think you will get neighborhoods with pockets of interest. But I can tell you, as an example, like I knocked on literally thousands of doors during my municipal campaign. As you say, I came 300 short of an 8-year incumbent. But I would go neighborhood to neighborhood. You'd go, and people would say things like, I'd really like a residents association, because I want something to happen in my park, or I want this, or I want that in my neighborhood. It would be really great if we had a neighborhood association. If you win, could you help put that together? And I'd be like, I actually, that's one of the things I'd like to work on. That'd be fantastic. Great, let's do that. Okay. So after the race, I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people's emails that were given to me. And I emailed everybody back and said, unfortunately I wasn't successful, but I'd like to help you put together these associations that so many of you talked passionately about them. And I got exactly 0 responses.
Wow.
I got a lot of people saying, we really wished you would have won. But no one actually said, I am willing to help you on this. I am willing. And I said, I'm willing to do all the work. Come, bring me the issues. I'll help you get organized. Nothing. And when you send that to about 1,000 people and you hear nothing but crickets, so to me, I think unless there's a significant issue, people are not engaged. People in the suburbs close their door and take care of their kids and have dinner at night and go to their jobs in the morning. And I think, it is challenging, I think, to get people engaged in this. The Mississauga separation is maybe a chance to get people off the bench and engaged. So on Monday night, a couple days ago, they had a public meeting. It was the most I've ever seen anyone show up to Mississauga City Hall. There had to be 200 plus people, where City Council was listening to the public on, what do you feel on this topic? And, there were different opinions. For the most part, people were very sympathetic and wanting to separate.
Yeah.
Being their own city, there was some civic pride and wanting that. But I also kind of look around the room and, I probably knew, a third of them.
Same people.
Because it's the same people again and again. One person told me, I think when I moved to Mississauga many years ago, that Mississauga is really run by about 500 or 600 people who are on all of the same committees, who spend all of their time doing all of the volunteer work again and again and again and again. And I think that person's probably off with their numbering a little bit. But you know what? It kind of does feel that way at certain points.
To the very extreme, I do want to talk about from a civic, and maybe this isn't civic engagement, maybe this is called something else, but I think about the alt-right rally that took place in Toronto a few weeks ago, and just how there were a ton of people there that showed up and were voicing their thoughts and their views. And again, I consider that civic engagement because it's really allowing people a platform to kind of share their opinions.
Yeah.
But again, I think it just comes down to the point that somehow permission has been enabled for all these people to come together and to not be scared to voice how they really feel, which is scary when you think about some of the things that we see happening in the world. But again, the Mississauga leaving Peel region example is completely different because it involves just people thinking about the well-being of their city in the grand scheme of
As a
things.
Bramptonian, what do you think of that? We're leaving you.
As a Bramptonian, it's interesting because I've always...
When you have kids, you'll move to Mississauga.
Or money.
well, spoiler alert, I don't live in Brampton anymore.
Right.
But when I think back to when I was on Rogers TV and I would cover a lot of the issues that would affect Brampton, a lot of people in Brampton always assumed that things were sunshine and rainbows in Mississauga because, again, we didn't see that type of passion come out of the citizens when it came to major issues. And even now, I can't tell you, like this year especially when I wasn't covering any of the local stuff, I can't tell you what the major issues were in Mississauga because of just everything that was creeping up about Brampton, even the personalities that we had involved that were running. I couldn't tell you what was the major issue that was affecting the city of Mississauga versus 4 years ago.
Yeah.
The fact that Mississauga is choosing to leave, I do understand where the city's coming from. I think Mississauga is definitely on the right path to become a very powerful city within Ontario that's going to be getting a lot of great infrastructure. It wouldn't surprise me in a few years if Mississauga even gets a sports team, like a major sports team, because I think the city itself has done a great job at building its infrastructure and building that type of community. But then again, I think it's going to have a very negative effect to Brampton because I think we rely on Mississauga a lot when it comes to having a voice or having an ally at the table. So it's kind of hard for me to comment. I know that's probably not the answer you want to hear, but it's hard for me to comment because
that's a very reasonable answer.
I don't live in Brampton anymore, so it's not
answer.
Drastically going to affect me. But I do unfortunately end up seeing Brampton getting the short end of the stick here, which I don't know what that looks like. But considering the amount of engagement we've been able to get from the province,
I do too. And I mean, I think part of that might come down to the Patrick Brown, Doug Ford vendetta.
Yeah.
But I think, frankly, it comes down to, you do have a city of almost 800,000 people. It's the only city in the country that operates under a regional model that's anywhere close to that size.
Yeah.
You could go through U.S. equivalents, and it's pretty much the same story. You've hit a critical mass of size where, you don't need the training wheels anymore. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And to the point on the finances, the research seems to indicate that we're sending as much as $85 million a year to the other jurisdictions. And that, there's a certain limit to, lending your neighbor a hose when his house is on fire versus building him a swimming pool in the backyard.
Yeah.
I think it hits the realm of rationality at this point. And I think, and then not even addressing Caledon, the third group, and they just make no sense, frankly, to be tacked onto either of these cities.
Have they had a voice at the table? I haven't heard anything from Caledon.
So Caledon has 5 votes on regional council out of 24.
Yeah.
They have 60,000 people, which is less than one single ward in Mississauga. So 5 votes for what would be a single councillor in Mississauga. It's in Canada we have proportional representation and other things too, in the sense of Prince Edward Island does have more MPs than they would otherwise be entitled to, but Prince Edward Island can't also just walk out of a meeting and veto things on a national level like Caledon can in the region of Peel and has done several times in the last 4 years. So when the majority of Mississauga and Brampton get together and go, hold on a minute, this makes no financial sense. We're not happy with the way you're operating, Caledon. Caledon goes, well, stuff you. I'm leaving. And they literally all get up and walk out of the meeting, which ends the meeting right there because they always have to have someone represented from every city. So I think, it doesn't work anymore. It's something that was designed in 1975, the region. And other regions may work because there's more of a balancing act of multiple cities of similar size. it's too much in this case.
I feel like it's just going to be an ugly breakup at the end of the day. But I never saw this being something that was going to end nicely, because I think ultimately one city's going to feel the wrath of it versus the other one.
Yeah, but I think
but they'll still share some things, right? Like police and stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think some of the misnomers out there are that just because you break up that you can't share some services. But there's no reason that you can't share utilities, police, things like that, where you would get a synergy by working across borders, and that you were already doing it now. So to break it up would actually incur cost. Yeah. To keep the status quo on those topics, you can move forward with, and you can appoint a board of people and just kind of move it. And by the way, to disclose, I actually have a website that I've set up.
All right, Joe.
SagaIndependence.ca. So.
Oh my god! We'll put that in the podcast body for people to check.
There you go. It's basically one of the things we were saying is having a challenge engaging people. So the point of the website was the province has a method of being able to solicit opinion, but they basically look for people to put in paragraph after paragraph of deep answers on these questions, and frankly, no one has the time. The point of my website was to just have a simple, I click here, I fill in my name and address, and I support separation, and then I can provide that off to the province and the MPPs when the time comes.
So here's my to bring it back to the topic around civic engagement. And Joe, you're someone who's very well informed. Wasim, you are too. For someone who's not well informed, but that just jumps on a side just because they want to feel important or they want to get involved, because that's the vibe I get sometimes where I used to live. Like, is that some people would just get on board on an issue because they just wanted to be a part of something, and when you actually were to ask them questions about it, they just wouldn't really know any context or any details. And I'm sort of feeling that way right now here locally when we talk about Brampton and Mississauga separating, is that some people are just, oh no, why do they want to leave us? And they're not really digging deep into the facts.
It's the emotion.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing. You go back to Brexit. Did a lot of the stuff that the people who were pushing Brexit were pushing was hogwash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it was
a lot of people
out and out lies.
A lot of people who voted Brexit realize that they've been lied to.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, they also feel like they're too deep to stop, I think, at some points. But I mean, out and out knowing lies from people who are like the foreign minister, and that's kind of too much, right? Like, it's the same thing with Donald Trump. When you say stuff like, "My father was born in Germany," and you're like, "No, Donnie." His birth certificate clearly says Brooklyn. Like, no, I swear, he even had an accent. You're like, what is wrong with you? But like, there's a certain level of lies. People are used to kind of shades of gray. I feel it'll be $10 million. Well, reality, maybe it's 8 or 12. So people are okay with a little bit of that but out and out stuff like, my father was born in a country other than the one he was born in, or you're going to separate, and here's a bunch of things that are not actually true. Yeah. That's the point where that's not serving the public well. And I think when you start hearing examples of that, people start questioning more and more and more what's true. And so you fall back to emotion.
Yeah.
And you just say, well, my heart feels that, don't leave me now. Don't leave me.
It's not you, it's me. That's the notion of it. Wasim, what are your thoughts?
Oh man, I think Joe summed it up pretty well, really.
Are you sad about this pending breakup?
No, I'm sad about a lot of things. Yeah. There's an Indian election coming up. Another right-wing prime minister is going to win comprehensively.
Oh man, I love Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj. I kid you not, this wouldn't surprise you. I didn't know.
Oh yeah, he did an episode on the Indian election, right?
I wonder if it's still up.
I think it
probably
is.
Still up. I didn't know much about what was going on in India, but I remember. My father-in-law loves to with me loves to talk Canadian politics, and then he loves to talk Indian politics with my brother-in-law who lives in Singapore. And then when my father and my father-in-law get together, they just talk about Indian politics. So when I watched the Hassan Minhaj Patriot Act episode on the Indian election, I was so excited to talk to my father-in-law about it because I started bringing up all these people in all these situations. And I felt like I could finally keep up in the conversation.
Here's the thing. You want people to be civically engaged in Mississauga? get City Hall to talk Pakistani and Indian politics,
there you go.
You are going to have a 70% voter turnout in the next election.
Absolutely. I think it's funny.
I say that in jest, but part of me is like, that is the demographic of the city.
That is. It's a diversity, man.
I can tell you, I am on a Facebook group that somebody added to me, and it's basically the Pakistani Prime Minister's Facebook group for Mississauga.
There you go.
Why does he have a Facebook group in Mississauga of fans?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And so does the Indian Prime Minister.
And I just got added. Imran Khan. Here you go. Hey, it's the PTI's.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? Why am I on this?
Yeah.
But somebody added me and I didn't say no.
Wow.
That's just something. I mean, or look at yesterday with the Israeli election, another tough guy.
Yeah.
So you've got tough guys in India, tough guys in...
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
The tough guy persona seems to be what people want, because I think, like I say, I think people feel uncertain.
When do the nice guys come back?
10 years later?
You know what? I find, if you think about global politics, I really think that we kind of go in these waves.
It's a backslide, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think about who was elected in the 1980s. Thatcher, Reagan, Mulrooney.
Yeah.
Who came after that? Blair,
Bush.
Clinton, Chrétien. Who came after that? Bush Jr. and Harper. And, it does feel like we kind of go in these waves. And that's what I say. Like, I said earlier, it feels like the bad guys are winning. And, like, we're in this funk where the populist person who thumps their chest the hardest and talks in the shortest sentences and, in some cases went to Ivy League schools but trash on elites. The billionaire guy who says he's for the blue-collar guy. This is... It's just a period of time where you kind of feel like, I don't understand stuff anymore. Mm-hmm. How do these people win? Mm-hmm. How does a guy who's a billionaire...
It's like Nav saying he's civically engaged even though he lives in a downtown condo.
Yeah.
Not really downtown, but... I'm not as civically...
You're looking sleepy. Are we boring or are you just tired?
No, I'm just happy we did this episode because I think this is a great one.
Yeah.
I love that we were able to talk about this. It's for me. I'm in the outside looking in when it comes to this Mississauga Brampton issue because I don't live in Brampton anymore. So I'm trying to peek my head in to see what's going on, but then it's kind of hard for me to pick a side because I do understand both points of view. But I'm curious to see where this ends up. It has like, when is the decision going to come down? Like, as Ford talked about what next steps are going to look like.
Oh no, I don't know anything about it.
So the guys who've been appointed by the province to look into this are actually very qualified people. Mm-hmm. Got a lot of experience in this stuff, and they are going to put together a report, I think, in June, and send it on to the premier and his cabinet. The actual decisions could come anytime after that. I mean, I guess the question is also, especially with Doug Ford being a kind of from the gut guy. Yeah. How much does he care about the report or not? Because I get the sense that
shoot from the hips.
Yeah, shoot from the hips. He seemed to kind of say the other day that he was favorable to Mississauga separating, but then took pains to also talk about how some of the rural areas have just bundles of city councillors. And it seems to me that almost like one of the whole reasons they're doing this is for efficiencies, quote unquote, right? Yeah. And amalgamations never create efficiencies. Mm-hmm. All they do is reduce the number of councillors, which is a very minor cost compared to what you do with the rest of the government. But that seems to almost be one of the only metrics he's using at the moment. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll find out different that's not true. But, reducing the number of politicians seems to be the thing that he's most interested in doing. And so, you go to a bunch of these town councils up in Muskoka or whatever, and you've got a town of 400 people with 5 councillors. Yeah, and then you go next to the next town and the next town and the next town. In a very short distance, you've got 25, 30 people, and they're only representing a very small number of people. Yeah. But they're also doing it part-time, right?
Totally.
Side of their desk kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the other part of it.
Are you going to, speaking of civic engagement, any of you guys going to work on any campaigns in the federal election?
I'm not. I'm historically nonpartisan. I'm kind of a sissy in regards to I vote for the person rather than the party. There was one instance, I'm not gonna lie, when I first was eligible for to vote, and again at that moment I was like, I'll vote for whoever my dad decides to vote for. Yeah, and I remember
that sounds so wrong.
I know it was so long back in the day, but I remember being home And I got a knock on the door, and it was one of the candidates for the party that my dad wasn't voting for. And me and that person actually hit it off very nicely. Like, we were able to, like...
But you hit it off with most people, so
I guess
that can't be a barometer.
But I was a student that was going into my first year of university.
Yeah.
Actually, I might have been in my first year at that time. I probably was in my first year and I was home. And I remember talking to her about just what I've been going through and just education, affordability, and all that. And I remember when that conversation ended, I was like, man, I can probably vote for her because I feel like I created a connection and she actually listened to me. Like, I felt there was an engagement there. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to helping people out, full transparency, I've had people reach out even for me to MC political events, and I've declined because I don't want to be in that realm. I learned a little bit when I moderated the Kathleen Wynne debate, even though I was very nonpartisan, just how it's very easy to be looped in to a certain party, even though you're not affiliated with them. So I prefer not to get involved.
Yeah. I think, you just demonstrated the power of door knocking, though, too, and making a personal connection.
It does, 100%.
And I think, that is something that never goes away in politics.
Yeah.
The personal connection, it matters so much.
It's huge.
And I think the lower tier governments, the municipals especially, that it's the only thing, because there is no party brand in Canada.
Yeah.
There is no conservatives or liberals or whatever.
Yeah.
You may be inclined to something, but you don't run on it.
Yeah.
And when you move into the provincial and the federal, where there are party brands, that's where the connection loosens.
Yeah.
And you can have even people who are extremely popular within their area, who everyone will say, oh, Susie or Bobby have really delivered for our city, and yet they get thrown out with the crowd. And, I think specifically of Charles Sousa. Mm. So, Finance Minister of Ontario, for all intents and purposes, an extremely hardworking MPP for many, many years. Hazel McCallion, who endorsed Doug Ford and the Conservatives, did actually take the time to go down to his riding and say, but Charles is my guy for this area. Mm-hmm. He has done everything that could be done for Mississauga. Please elect Charles.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he got washed out with everyone else.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge of municipal politics, federal and provincial politics is, you kick the bums out or you wash them all in. Mm-hmm. And it really doesn't have to do with the local candidate a lot of times. And frankly, it gets embarrassing sometimes that who gets elected in those big wave elections. You look at this person, you're like,
very embarrassing.
This is the greatest job you'll ever have in your life. You're never going to get you got in on a wave. You're literally the dog because nobody else would run for the seat. And oh my goodness, now you're an MP. This is insane. So I think,
it's definitely I'm already thinking of a few that were like that in the last election that might be in trouble.
Every party has it.
No. Why would he be in trouble?
Well, as in, I don't know if they're going to keep their seat.
Oh.
Yeah,
maybe.
We'll see.
But I think especially when you get elections where you go from a third to first, it happens very rarely. Mm-hmm. But you think of the Bob Rae government where they looked around and they went, we can't have these people in cabinet. This is embarrassing. And they literally had ex-criminals in a couple of cases because they hadn't really thought they were going to win. And so they put somebody into a slot just because they needed to fill the slot.
Yeah.
And, it does become embarrassing sometimes.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'm actually really excited about the upcoming election, just to kind of watch it and see how it all nets out. Because I don't know, I think Canada itself will be somewhat exposed in a way.
What the other thing we haven't mentioned is the international stuff. I mean, Russia and China are out there.
Yeah,
they're not being passive in democratic elections. I mean, they get involved in Estonian elections.
Oh, jeez.
So if you think that they're not going to somehow be out there buying up Facebook ads, setting up websites with absolute horseshit garbage, honestly,
especially after the Huawei incident too, right?
There's a lot of I mean, Canada's not on the good side of either of those countries too. So to have them manipulate something, who knows? Now, will that manipulation actually change large numbers of votes and actually affect the outcome? Well, that's a whole other debate. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, this is what we live in now. Countries are not sitting back and just taking it. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if going back to India, if Modi decides, this Trudeau guy's a bit of a pain in my butt, and decides to make public statements to the Indian community in Canada.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Now that doesn't mean that the Indians in Canada will care what he says.
No. That's still a powerful. Yeah. There's a pull over there for sure.
But Canada has been on the wrong side of a lot of these strongmen because we've tried to be the traditional
voice of
Canadian
reason.
voice of reason.
Yeah.
And so we're on the wrong side of Turkey and Venezuela.
Well, Angela Merkel's already paid the price, so maybe Justin's next, right? Because for the longest time it was Justin and Merkel were the last remaining.
God bless Merkel.
Yeah.
God bless Merkel.
What a lady, man. What a leader.
Well, on that note,
I
think now
your eyes are calling for an end.
No.
It's okay. I'm trying to send a message to the listeners. Nav's eyes are drooping.
No. I'm just thinking about how we're gonna leave at that note regarding just scaring the listeners about the upcoming election and just how we're gonna have other countries intervening.
Scare them more, pitch them the next episode.
Well, you know what? The best answer is always to actually vote.
Yes, exactly.
Because if you don't, think about what your neighbor's going to do,
and don't listen to the Facebook ads,
and don't trust what you see on Facebook because half of it's horseshit.
Especially with the ban around white separatist content, which we talked about a few weeks ago, and the fact that the same separatists are now buying ad space on Facebook.
Pick up a real newspaper from the Globe and Mail, the National Post, the Toronto Star, any or all of the above. A couple of weeks before the election, make your decision based on what you read there.
And watch the debates.
That's real
watch
people,
the debates,
and watch the debates.
I agree. Yeah, debate. I'm actually really looking forward to the debates.
Where are all these people getting fries from?
I think the cafeteria is still open.
Okay.
Yeah, we can go check it out.
So let's go check that out. That's the note you want to end the podcast
This is Wasim talking in my IFB back in the day, telling me to wrap things up.
Yeah.
I want to thank the both of you for joining me. This was actually a very insightful conversation. I'm glad we were able to have it because I'll be honest. I've been wanting to do a show for quite some time around the Canadian election, but I wanted to bring on two individuals that I know that can definitely speak to it from a very eloquent standpoint. So I appreciate both of you guys for sharing your time here. If any of the listeners want to connect with either one of you, Joe, where can they reach out? Maybe you should plug the website again. The one.
Sure. The website was www.sagaindependence.ca.
You should create t-shirts. You got a great merchandise, stickers.
You got to add
t-shirts.
SSL to that website.
Oh jeez, I gotta pay for all this. It's coming out of my pocket here. Or you can connect with me on Twitter at Joe Horneck. I'm around. I'm a pretty easy person to find.
Yeah, great guy. Thank you so much for coming on. And Wasim, the man of mystery. I
just want to hang out with you both. So if anyone wants to find me, they can find me through your both handles.
I was gonna say, I think when we first did the episode, I was like, where can they connect with you? And I think you remember saying that you don't want to share any of your contact details.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't want to connect with anyone.
I'm just thinking about
I'm the opposite. I'll go to a coffee with anybody.
I know.
I'll go for a coffee with people I know.
I'm just thinking about
random listeners.
Ringing endorsement for the listeners.
It's literally like I usually have a section in the podcast bio where I say, connect with the panelists, and I have my information. I have the panelists' information. I'm probably just gonna have my name with my contact, Joe with his, and then Wasim just like nothing.
Yeah,
just like question mark.
Yeah, no one else. Maybe like the shrug emoji.
I'm an enigma.
From parts unknown.
Parts unknown. Yeah. And then if anybody wants to connect with New Theory Radio, it's at New Theory Radio on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you want to connect with me, it's at Nanwa on Twitter and at Nav Nanwa on Instagram. And yes, we are now available on Spotify, so please send us a follow and check out all of our previous episodes as well as all of our new ones, which drop each and every Friday. And that's a wrap for this week's episode. So Joe and Wasim, thank you so much for joining me yet again, and you will hear all of us next time. Peace.
At American University, we don't just hope for change, we create it. We don't just dream of a better world, we make it a reality. With a graduate degree from AU, you'll access expert faculty and connections throughout DC to develop skills and experience to turn your passion into purpose. And that purpose can make all the difference in your career. Discover the difference a degree makes at american.edu/grad school.